Nice to see you again. So, fear and anxiety. Anybody knows what that is? So we all, I remember when I was, many years ago, when I began teaching, giving classes, there was an elderly man. I mean, relatively, he was I was in my 20s, so relative to me, he was in his 50s or 60s, and he said to me, it was the first time he came to a class I gave, and he said, you need to tackle fear. You need to tackle the topic of fear. So I said, why fear? He said, because it's the most invisible enemy. You know, we all have enemies, some more obvious than others. He said, but fear is silent. It doesn't make any noise. But it's the most paralyzing force. I just remembered it because he was definitely speaking from his heart, from experience. It wasn't just like, a good idea. And over the years I got to know him, and I used to talk to him a lot. And then I realized he wasn't the only person on earth that has fear. It was a big epiphany for me. I also have fear. We all have fear. So I thought it would be really good to dissect. You want to solve a problem. There are two ways. There's the symptomatic approach, where you deal with the symptoms. Someone has pain, they take a painkiller. Someone has anxiety, so today we have antidepressants or other methods. But at best, it suppresses or somewhat mitigates and minimizes the impact, the effect. But then there's not remedial medicine, but we'll call it like preventive medicine, or maybe root healing, which is getting to the source of it. Just, even though it's hard to give a talk like this with jokes, but because if you take it seriously, fear and anxiety, we all know, can be quite debilitating. But still, humor always helps out. So there was this fellow who was having nightmares at night, just couldn't sleep. And his nightmares were demons. There were demons that he felt were under his bed. And every time he was about to fall asleep, he thought another demon is about to jump out. So he would look under his bed and disappeared. So in his mind, he came up with a whole conspiracy that these demons they move quickly. So as soon as they hear someone coming, they disappear. And as soon as he's back in bed again, they must be there again. Now we all know our irrational fears don't have to make sense. And that was it, but he couldn't sleep. So, of course, he found himself a psychiatrist who charged top dollar. What's top dollar for a psychiatrist? What are we talking about? $800 an hour. I'm not looking to anyone as an expert here, just in case. I'm just wondering what's the going rate. Okay. Anyway, he starts going to the psychiatrist, and they start exploring all the usual suspects: his childhood, his relationships, his mother, his father, his marriage or lack of marriage, everything you go through, someone's history to try to understand. And this was the classic psychotherapist approach, which can be years, it can be a lifetime. The only thing that's guaranteed is that their psychiatrist is getting paid. Okay, 6 months pass, and he's still having nightmares. He has to take sleeping pills and all kinds of stuff. Nothing's working. Comes Rosh Hashanah, and the rabbi, as usual, the annual appeal, raise some money for the new year. And he comes to him, this guy would always give a nice donation. He says, Rabbi, I can't give a donation this year. Why? All my money's going to my psychiatrist. I'm depleted. Why are you going to a psychiatrist? He says, all these fears, these demons. You start telling him the same thing. The demon's under my bed. The rabbi looked at him and said, I'll give you advice to get rid of all your fears, and you don't have to pay me a penny. Just make your donation, that's all. So he says, what's your idea? And he gives them the idea. And lo and behold, that's it. From there on, no more demons. You're coming to the second end of the joke, but okay, so be it. You'll watch the replay, if there is one. They asked me to record it, so I am recording it. Okay. Anyway, no longer psychiatrists, no longer psychiatry bills. Psychiatrist meets him in shul on Rosh Hashanah and says to him, what did you happen to you? He said, all my issues are resolved. I have to spend $800 a week. It's not going anywhere anyway. He said, what was the solution? He says, my rabbi gave me this simple solution. What was it? He told me to cut off the legs of my bed. So the bed is now on the ground, so there can't be any demons coming in there. That made sense to him. How do you like that? So that's it. That's my lecture. Cut off the legs and all your anxieties will go away. Obviously, it's just the point I'm making that fears are things that live in our heads or in our hearts. And they don't have to necessarily be based on reality for them to paralyze us. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And you could go through years thinking that they're real forces at work that in some way are attacking you. And in truth, it's not the case at all. But obviously, we also have to recognize there are true fears as well. So how do we even tackle a topic like this in any normal way? Because the fact is, since it's emotional, it's not just something you can talk away. You can talk about it all day. If you have real fears, you have fears. So I like to look at it from a point of view, like, where did it start from? Like, are we born with fear? Is there an inherent fear that each of us, when we leave our mother's womb and come out into this world, somewhere it's ingrained, and maybe it takes time till it gets triggered? If that's the case, there's one way to approach it. If, however, it's something that is superimposed and something that we acquire through life, that's a very different approach. So the best way to look at it is look at children. If you study children, do they have natural fears? So I've done that. I'm not going to suggest this is a scientific study. I didn't go through all the numbers and all the demographics. But I have my own children, I have my grandchildren, and we have plenty of children right here that are living, I don't want to call them specimens, but they're living realities. And you'll see, generally speaking, young children, the younger, of course, the better, because you want to have the purest form. In a laboratory, you want to isolate all external factors and just get to the core. So you look at newborns or very young age, and you don't see any natural fear at all. Yes, a child will cry when they're hungry or tired or in pain. I don't know, would I call that fear? That's not fair. If you leave a child alone for too long and not being nurtured and cared for, I'm independent of the fact whether the child's getting its needs met. So it will have impact, but the child's not going to start trembling or in fear of anything, per se. I'm sure that human beings, just by nature, there's reflexes. That I'm sure if you put a child close to some higher temperature or something that is threatening, there's the physical reflex that every human being will have. But I don't think that's what we're addressing here. We're talking here, and actually that's a healthy fear. That's like almost like an immune system that reacts to anything that's dangerous. Now children don't have that developed as well. That's why They need our protection. But internal fears, that what we call our demons, our shadows, our darker spaces, children don't seem to have. I'm not suggesting that it doesn't exist at all. I'm sure, unfortunately, children can be born with very anxious mothers or other factors that probably affect their development, which has really not really been studied yet extensively, because it's very hard to, we can know a lot what's going on during pregnancy, but it's hard to understand the psychological state of mind of a child, meaning a fetus in development. So children are a very good example. And using, which I always do, my own Torah background, you may wonder, where does the Torah talk about this? Which pasuk, which verse, and which Talmudic statement talks about fear? Now there are much more than you think. It's just not emphasized in our yeshiva systems. So even big scholars don't really see the psychological depth that exists. But it really comes down to a very simple story that everybody knows. If a child in microcosm is who we are in our purest form, so in the macrocosm, that was Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Essentially, the Garden of Eden, what's called paradise, is the epitome of innocence. That's what Adam and Eve were, innocent, like children. They were 20 years old, but psychologically they were newborns, which means they had not yet tasted from the forbidden fruit, which is in a sense losing their innocence. And if you understand the story, it's profoundly psychological, because it talks about good and evil, it talks about shame, it talks about sexuality, it talks about pre and post, which is really the story of all of our lives. How we were when we were younger, more innocent, more naive, and what happens to us when we cross certain lines, when we lose our innocence. I remember once giving a talk, it was actually in Manhattan, the Kabbalah shul, and I spoke about the loss of innocence, and then about existential loneliness that sets in, which I'll talk about shortly. And I remember Hadassah Karbach, she was the wife of Elichaim Karbach, twin brother of Shlomo. A very intelligent woman. She's in her deep 90s now. May she be well. But I remember she came over to me after my talk. She said, "Please, don't talk so much about loss of innocence and existential loneliness. You make me cry." He was a very sensitive person. Because all of us go back to the moment, when did you lose your innocence? When was the first time that your dreams were shattered, or the bubble was burst? It's a sad moment for all of us, because it's like we crossed over. And we all search for that, the innocence of our youth, when things seemed simpler and more seamless, and we didn't yet experience the ugliness and the duplicity and all that comes with that in life. And it's actually a good thing to be able to, from time to time, to try to reclaim that part of us. And I mentioned in one of my talks, in psychology there's a concept of discovering your inner child. And there are other references. If you want some more modern references, there's this search for Rosebud. You all know the film Citizen Kane, considered the greatest film ever. So there's the whole story it's really the story of Randolph Hearst. And it's a story about his innocence when he was a little child and then torn away from his parents. And the rosebud is the word, the mystery word that the whole film is trying to understand. What is a rosebud? And at the end of the film, they discover rosebud is the name of a sled, a snow sled, that reminded him of his youth, of his childhood. The last time he saw his mother and father, he was in the middle of a snowstorm, and he remembers seeing the rosebud, the name of the sled. And a few times, it's a very fascinating way the story is told. I don't know if you know what I'm referring to. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, does that age me or something? Citizen Kane, yes, a film from the 50s. Orson Welles. Anyway, I'm not here to advertise Citizen Kane. It's just one of many films and books where they all talk about that search for that pure world. Some of us call it paradise, some of us call it utopia, some call it innocence. But it's a very fascinating, because it really goes back to the biblical story. So if you want to understand anything, this is just a rule across the board. You always want to go back to the root. That's the way you always try to understand a situation. So many of us are we are so consumed with the symptoms, you forget that every symptom comes from somewhere. Now obviously if you can solve a problem quickly and get rid of a fear, by all means, then God bless you. But if it's something that is continuously haunting you, and it just constantly crops up here and there and affects your life, there's always a root. Now, I'm not suggesting we have to always go back to every root and uncover every detail, and I don't even know if it's possible. But we have to understand that fear and anxiety is not our natural state. I can tell you, in all the work I do, the first thing is trying to tell people you're not defined by what has happened to you. Because once you define yourself by your circumstances, especially painful ones, then you can't separate between you and the pain. So you become like an embodiment of it. And then how do you help someone who feels they're the problem? You need to know you have a problem. It's not that you are the problem. But that's not easy to do. But that's a critical piece. So that's why I'm making such a strong case here that fear is not our natural state. We must know that. It happens to us as a result of things. And it can be many different things. We'll talk about some of them. So the real goal is, and I'm talking now long term, short term. Sometimes you just need to do certain things. Yes, if certain medications can help somebody feel a little less dark, a little less anxious, and that can help just to clear the air and allow them to function, by all means. Obviously you should always be regulated professionally. But I'm not here to talk about the medical side, the clinical side of it. I'm talking more the deeper side, which is the more therapeutic, the more long-term. How can you live a less fearful life, more than just dealing with a particular circumstance or situation? So I just want to qualify that. I'm not talking clinical. That requires different type of interventions. So point number one that I made is that it's not you. It's something outside of you that has somewhat taken control of your life, part of your life. It's critical to know that, because that means then the question is, so who am I then? How do I discover the other part of me that's more of a joyful? Talk about children. Not only are they not fearful, they have natural joy. They naturally smile. There's a natural exuberance, animation, a type of free abandon. Look at children. I could study a child for hours. It's just so beautiful to see. And again, any of the sad parts are just usually pretty quick to pass if you satisfy the need that the child has. So how can we access that when we're now adults and we have, whether we lost our innocence or whether we've experienced different losses or traumas that have impacted us, and we do have demons, real or imagined. So that's step two. So the first step, as I said, is to distinguish and separate the two. So I'm not suggesting it's easy, but that's step one. Step two is trying to uncover the part of you that fear has not affected. That's really the ultimate goal. And if you can master those to some extent, you can actually really create change in your life. So let's discuss this a bit more. So I'll use what I like to call a psycho-spiritual model, which somewhat combines a mystical or spiritual take on the human being and a psychological one. The truth is they're really almost synonymous. I don't know if you know this, that psychology actually means study of the soul. That's what it means. Logy is study, and psycho I mean, it's not psycho, but psycho as in psychology. Psyche is soul in Latin and Greek. So it's the study of the soul. I'm going to go into now a whole discussion of how they divorce psychology from spirituality, but that's very fascinating on its own. It's part of the secularization of science in general, and which I don't think has really been helpful. You understand that there's two different worlds, but nevertheless, we are fundamentally human beings of spirit and soul and emotions and intellect, and all these forces are not mechanical, they're not physical, they're internal forces. So using that model, I'm basing it, just to give you a little background, a little on Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings that talk about it, which are extremely helpful. Why? Because you want to have that. You want to have a picture of what you look like, an x-ray of yourself, before all these forces started shaping you. So the best way is to look for something, so who's giving us a picture of what does our psyche look like? And when you get that picture, then you can then superimpose it or juxtapose it over you ever see like when a doctor takes an x-ray of your lungs, not your lungs, of someone's lungs. So then they'll put it up on a screen, and then they'll put like healthy lungs, and here's what these lungs look like. Why? Because you need contrast. How do you know if something is unhealthy? How do you know it's unhealthy if you don't compare it to something that's healthy? So the better we get a picture, like I said, the picture of the child, the better the picture of what you look like, then you can say, okay, here are the extras, here are the forces that are somewhat distorting or clouding my judgment or my perspective, which is what fear and anxiety does. So looking at that map, actually, you know what? I wasn't going to do that, but I might as well. I know you're familiar with my book on the spiritual guide to counting the Omer. Nobody? Okay. Oh, okay, good. No, even if you're not, I'm going to make reference to it. So I did a book years ago, which takes these 49 days between Pesach and Shavuos, when we count the Omer every night. And if you look in the Siddur, in the prayer book, you'll see at each day, in small words, there's a reference, Chesed Shebechesed, Gvura Shebechesed, Tiferes Shebechesed. And it goes through 7 weeks, through the 7 emotions that cover the entire spectrum of human experience. And what I did in the book was I explained each one of them, the 7 times 7, Chesed within Chesed, love within love, discipline within love, compassion within love, and going through the whole process. And actually that is taken straight from Kabbalistic and mystical texts that give us an x-ray of what your emotions look like. So if you can get a picture of what does healthy love look like, then you can say, okay, here is the way I love, not exactly the way healthy love is, and you can start comparing. It's just like when you teach someone art or music, you want to show them what the masters created, and then they can say, okay, here's where I stand. Or someone's running a marathon, or someone who's excellent in any given sport or skill. So then you can come back and say, okay, here's where I am in comparison. Just as an aside, I remember when I was writing Toward a Meaningful Life, so the editor, I had hired an editor to help me. His name was Stephen Dubner. You may know him today as co-author of Freakonomics. So this was before he was known. So he actually was a child born to 2 Jewish parents who converted to Catholicism. Yeah, in our modern day and age. One of them was, the father grew up in Borough Park. I mean, it's a story of its own, but just to give you a little kind of, let's call it a dramatic or maybe traumatic, he actually wrote a book called Turbulent Souls, talking about himself. Like his father coming from church on Sunday, eating gefilte fish with matzah. Because that's what he grew up with in Borough Park, a frum Jew. It's in the story of its own. But Stephen had no idea of Judaism at all. Today he's married to a Jewish woman, he has Jewish children, and he gave a name after his father David. I was at the bris. It's an interesting story, but there's one thing that I remember. So I was writing chapters, so I would send him a chapter longhand, like maybe 80 pages, and his job was to get it down to 20 pages, to cut out the duplicate. I was essentially like film. You do the filming and then you do the cutting. So I remember one Saturday night he calls me up. I don't know, it was like 12 o'clock at night. We had essentially we were around the clock. There was a lot of pressure, time pressure. And he said to me, you're destroying my life with this book. Yeah, well, he says, I'm dating this woman, and I'm reading your chapter, the chapter you just sent me on love, and I look at my girlfriend, and she's nothing close to what you're writing here. And what you're writing is resonating. And so I said, so what are you going to do? Which are you going to choose? So he said, I'm just telling you that it's really, well, within the 2 weeks, he got rid of her. And he told me later, he says, you start reading what love really is, and then you realize that's not what I'm doing exactly. So he invited me to his wedding, and he asked me to say a few words. So I said, I think I have to thank you. I'm part of the process here, because had he not dropped that girlfriend, he wouldn't have married this fine Jewish woman. And it must mean that she is living up to the standards. My point is that sometimes you can be living in darkness and not know it's dark. The Baal Shem Tov has a beautiful way of putting it. On the verse it says, "Vayemahu haster asters panai," and that day, God says, "I will conceal my face." Double concealment. What is the double concealment? He said, because there's one concealment that it's dark, and another one you don't know it's dark. The concealment conceals the concealment. What was otherwise known as denial. Everything is great. How are things? Great. Fabulous. Everyone's stupendous. As soon as the more those adjectives go, oh man, this person must be really suffering. Couldn't be better. There was one guy told me the other day here at this program, I said, I don't ask anymore how your marriage is because then you find out all kinds of things. So I say, how are you doing? He says, well, at least I'm not in a bad marriage anymore. That was the good news. I'm not trying to lift your spirits with that, but the point being is that the things we don't know, and the things we don't know, in that classic line. And so getting a picture of something that's healthy, besides the fact that it helps you to work toward it, it also opens your eyes. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, just by coming to my house and seeing a normal family putting children to sleep, forget about what did more impact than everything I said in the class. Because they just saw, wow, I never saw a healthy home or a normal environment. That's why it's so critical to have a model that allows you to see a life, what would it look like, a life without fear or anxiety, or at least much less fear and anxiety. That's why I'm quoting, what is love, what is discipline, what are these 7 emotions? And these are your emotions, that's how you were born. And then you can say, okay, where do I stand with each one of them? Because if fear and anxiety affects anything in life, the first frontier is going to be relationships. You can get away, you can be a very successful business person and be successful academically in thousands of ways, and no one can know what's lurking beneath the scenes. Because we learn to survive, and we learn to function, and we learn to wear masks and hide our inner feelings. But as soon as you get into a relationship, it's not so simple. Because relationship requires feelings, requires trust and commitment. So yes, some of us continue to play the game even in relationships, and some have mastered the art. Like I remember meeting a guy and he said to me, I want to tell you, I finally figured out, I think, the formula for having a relationship without commitment. which made me cringe and smile to him. I said to him, really, does she know about it yet? He says, no, that's the point. That I can continue having a relationship. And I said, how, and he's figured out how to keep her from knowing that he's not committed. How do you like that? I don't want to, feed you with any negative thoughts. Because I once said this story, and then I saw couples looking at each other and saying, oh, maybe, you know what, maybe he's doing that to me too. So that's not my intention here. Please, I just want to make sure. My point is that we can get away with a lot of stuff, but when it comes to a real relationship, and if you're not present, somewhere it's going to give. And especially, as I said, an emotional arena. So getting back to the points I was making, it may sound a little scattered, but it's not. Just summing up what I've said so far. The number one, you must know that you are not fear. Fear and all its effects and anxiety are things that happen to us, or results of what things that happen to us. It's not you. You must know how to separate the two. Again, I'm not suggesting it's easy at all, but you have to begin there. Number two, you have to discover the parts of you that have not been taken hostage by your fears. In other words, to help emerge, help cultivate that part of yourself that you can celebrate. And the third thing that I'm discussing right now, which I'm middle of, is, so what does it look like? What do you look like if we were able to get rid of these other effects in our lives? Just hypothetically, what would you look like? And for that, you need a map. And you can't create your own map, because your map is going to be based on your subjective experiences. So you need something independent of that. That's why I was referring to the story in the Bible, the Torah story of the Garden of Eden, which really is the story of, as I said, innocence and lost innocence, and then how do we reclaim it, how do we regain it. And using also the model in Kabbalah for the 7 emotions, which is this period of time. So when you can understand what it looks like, the healthy version, then you could say, okay, here's where I stand in regard to that. And you'd be surprised how much these 3 things I just said can change the perspective. Because the most powerful and most negative force of fear and anxiety, as I said earlier, is its invisibility. Forces like that love to be invisible. The worst enemy is the invisible enemy, because you don't even know where the enemy is. You don't even know what it looks like. You just see its effect on you. You take a psychological warfare. How much in actual warfare is psychological? Why is intelligence so important? Because if you think your enemy is stronger than you, even if they're not, they will win. That's just how it is. Because it weakens you, it demoralizes you, it destabilizes you, because so creating a mirage and creating all kinds of deception is critical. Winston Churchill put it this way: in time of war, the truth is so precious, you have to surround it with an army of lies. Because the lies keep people from figuring out where the truth is. So as soon as you can shine a light on fear in some way, you're getting places. So what do we look like in that place? So if you have children, look at the children that you have. If you don't have your own children, look at other people's children, relatives, and so on. Study them for a little while. And you'll see yourself in a pure version, pre-tree of knowledge. Pre-chet tzadas, let's put it this way. It's quite seamless. Children on their own are not duplicitous. They don't lie. That's why you have to always tell children, don't say everything you see at home, because they naturally, what you see is what you get. Now we see that as foolish. They're not smart enough to hide things. But think of it this way, they also don't have secrets. Where do they learn to lie? Can you identify the first time you lied in your life? You probably can't, because once we lie, that's who we become. It's hard to point out exactly what day it happened. But it usually is a result of what you saw around you. You saw your parents lie, or you saw them lie to you. When I say lie, it doesn't always mean an overt lie. It could be a white lie, it can be some some deception, we call echad b'peh, echad b'lev. You say one thing, you mean another. I remember my mother in the kitchen once, someone came into our home, and my mother had certain facial gestures and body language when she didn't like something, which I picked up on. And I saw her reaction to somebody. But when the person came in, she was smiling and everything was like beautiful and all that. So I asked my mother afterwards, is this your best friend? Like you're really good friends? She didn't want to tell me what she thinks about her, but I already knew because I saw her face before she greeted her. I confronted my mother with this later. I said, you taught me how to lie in a way. I have a good relationship with my mother, just for the record. But I do remember this. So you could think, of course, you can't tell everybody what you feel about them. That's not appropriate. But the fact is, for a child, it's the first time you see it. You say, oh, you know what? But we talk about the world to come. We call it Olam Emes. Why is it called Emes? Because there's no two worlds. There's no duplicity. What you see, there's only one thing, truth. Would we live in a world of truth? No, absolutely not. There are truths around. So in a way, Emes is like the counterforce to fear and to anxiety and to all that duplicity that I'm describing, because that's the world of the inner child. That's the world of innocence. What happened when Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge? And just for the record, it wasn't an apple tree. That's like a myth. Based on some distortion, I have a theory, but there were 4 opinions actually what the tree of knowledge were. One is an esrig, of all things. Yeah, the esrig we use on Sukkot. One was a grain, which is connected to Pesach, and one was a fig, third opinion, and the fourth are grapes, a vine. Those are the 4 opinions. But regardless, what happened when they ate from the tree of knowledge? Which itself is somewhat a little mysterious what happened. What happens is they became self-conscious. Till that point, they were like an innocent child, and that's why they were naked and not conscious of it. They had nothing to be conscious of. Everything was fine. God created them, and they have a mission in this life, and there's no 2 agendas. So their whole being, including their sexuality, including everything about them, was just part of God's beautiful creation. Just like newborn children. Children are not conscious of themselves in that way. As soon as they ate from the tree of knowledge, now they became what we'll call the human ego, human consciousness, and there's divine consciousness. And that's why God says to Adam, so this is a strange question he asks him. He says, Ayeko, where are you? Well, Hashem didn't know where he was. So he's saying, where are you? I don't recognize you. The divine image in which you were created, that pure, seamless you, that was completely aligned with your purpose, I don't recognize you. There's 2 yous now. There's the divine you that was concealed, because now you're someone else. So it's like meeting a friend after years and say, I don't recognize you, you're not the person I knew. And there's a lot of shame in that, healthy shame actually. That's why Adam and Eve, they covered themselves, because suddenly they realized, I'm naked. Suddenly I realized, like I'm somebody. I mean, a lot can be said about this, but essentially this is the core root of all fear. Because when you are where you belong, you know exactly your purpose, what are you afraid of exactly? How could anything disturb you? It's when you lose that sense of connection. You know, to put it in very called balbatish, practical terms, you ask somebody, who are you? So I've tried this many times, and I can tell you exactly what happens. They give you their business card. That's usually what happens. I know today it's not a business card. They give you their email address. I don't know, whatever. And when I say to the person, I say, 1 second, your business card, you just gave me what you do. That's not who you are. That's what you do. And some people don't respond, and some people respond by saying, what should I say? I've been doing it so long, what I do has become who I am. Can you imagine? Who you are should define what you do. But for most of us, that's not the case. Even if you like the job you're doing, which statistics show most people don't like their jobs. But even those that like their jobs, many of them learn to like it by necessity. So you learn to like it. There are very few people you're going to meet that will say, my work that I do is completely aligned with my soul and everything that I believe in. Because we don't have that luxury all the time. You can even be trained in something and be good at it, and then you come out of school and the opportunity doesn't present itself. Suddenly you're doing something that you may never have thought of doing. And I'm not saying you can't excel at it. But we are constantly dealing with compromise and negotiating between who we really are and what we do. As a matter of fact, we know a lot more about what we do, I hope, than who we are. Because who you are, that's a big question. Who am I? Is that my soul? Is it how tall I am? But there's a perfect example of the dichotomy and the dissonance that I'm talking about. And dissonance is a very important word here, because that's what happened when they ate from the tree of knowledge. The birth of dissonance. It could be subtle, it could be very blatant. And I know you may say, that's the root of fear? My fears are horrible. Yes, it is the root. Remember, nothing begins becoming a monster. Monsters that don't come out of nowhere. You get lost off the road. You don't get lost in the forest suddenly in a minute. You veer off a drop and you keep going, and then suddenly at some point you realize I'm completely wandered off. And that's exactly how it is psychologically. I mean, I wish we could find a formula how we can go back to that moment where we veered the wrong way, made the wrong decision, and correct it and nip it in the bud. But that's not usually what happens. So one lie leads to another, and one distortion to another, and one dissonance to another dissonance. And then you have yourself an identity of who you are that's not very much aligned with who you should be, or who you could be, and who you really are. So of course there's going to be fear. You're afraid of yourself in a way. It's not even the fear of another. You look at people that are fearless. There are not many, but there are. You'll see always one thing. They're not afraid, not of others, they're not afraid of themselves. They have confidence, they have courage. But as soon as you're asking yourself what someone else is going to think, do I fit in, and so on, what are you really saying? You're saying, I don't know what I stand for. You are completely confident. I can rest assured. And I don't like to use negative example, but it's just one of the best examples. If God forbid you were just called an emergency right now, and you have to run somewhere to help somebody that you love or care about, and God forbid no one should ever know that. I'm just giving an example. All your fears will disappear in a second. No, I'm sure there'll be fear about this situation. But I'm saying you're not going to start saying, oh, you know what? What about lunch? Or what about what people are going to think? Because you right now, there's a sense of urgency that crystallizes clearly where you need to be right now, and that's that. And tell me, the happiest moments in our lives are the times when we feel what I'm doing right now is exactly what I should be doing. And when you don't have an answer that I know that this is what I must be doing right now, you're always going to have a fear. Maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Maybe it should be something else. Maybe I'm in the wrong job. Maybe I'm married to the wrong person. Maybe all the maybes start rolling in. So fear is actually, in this context, the absence of focus, of clarity, of seamlessness. But then it becomes a machine, a monster of its own. Now it's an enemy. But think of it. What is darkness, if not the absence of light? Fire and water, for example, are two adversarial forces. Enough fire can evaporate large bodies of water. Enough water can extinguish biggest fires. And they battle. You see, water and fire are two forces that battle. Try light and darkness. You could have a very dark room, pitch black, bring in one little flame, there's no battle. The flame automatically dispels darkness. The only thing is, if it's a very dark room, a little flame is only going to illuminate one little corner. So you need more light. So if you think of that, darkness is simply the absence of light. But the darkness then becomes, in our perception, a force of its own. You think there's a real, like I said, demons under your bed, and you just can't get out of your head. And the more you think about it, the more you're feeding the monster. Yeah, you're giving power to it. That's real nature of fear. That's why its invisible nature is so powerful. Because the more invisible it is, the more powerful it becomes. But if you expose it, and how do you expose it? Not by fighting fear with weapons. Bring a little light in. Find something in your life that you're certain of, that you know you should be doing. Whatever it is, everybody has their priorities. Something you know you should be doing. I remember vividly a guy who was around 32 years old coming to my class. I was giving a class then in Upper West Side, Manhattan. Very good-looking individual I saw put together. And he would sit in the back week after week. He never came over to me, never spoke. But I saw he was listening very intently. One day he does come over to me. And we started talking. I said, very educated, really. And he said to me, I don't want to really tell you my name because my father is very well known, very wealthy man in New York, businessman. Later he told me his name because he didn't want to taint my opinion of him. He says, but I have to tell you, I have everything that one can be blessed with. All the money in the world. I can fly anywhere, anytime. I have girlfriends. I have boyfriends. He had everything. Wherever I want. I was a spoiled brat. And I'm in need of nothing. But I'm completely miserable. Internally. And as much as I seem to be free, I'm in a gilded cage. It's a big cage, but it's a cage. And emotionally, psychologically. And the reason is very simple. Everything I have was given to me. I haven't earned anything in my life. Now, he was aware, he wasn't covering that. He says, but I live more fear than people that don't have anything. Someone told me about you, so I decided I'm going to come check it out. And I really like what you say. It resonates with me. How do I get out of this cage? And I remember, the more I talked to him, the more I felt really, I can't say I never feel hopeless. But with this guy, no way. So I said to him, can you live without your father's money? Can you just say no? Just figure it out on your own. He says, I don't think so. And he was honest. Because I said, that's really what's the noose around your neck, is everything you have. So he couldn't do that. So then I said, I'll tell you the truth. If you're not ready to do that, I'm a honest guy. I'm going to tell you some type of gimmick. I don't have any magic pills. It comes down to becoming a man of your own. You'll be 80 years old and just have lived off your father, fat of the land. How could you ever have confidence? How could you never did anything on your own. And you have so much going for you. I thought, and even that sense of failure wasn't strong enough for him to get out of his comfort zone. So I don't know, God blesses sometimes to say the right thing. So suddenly I had an epiphany. I said to him, I have an idea. I do have a suggestion. You should volunteer once a week to go visit a home, special children, and you take a walk with a Down syndrome child or someone that has another mental or emotional handicap, disability, and that's what you should do. Once a week, take a walk with these children. He looked at me like I was crazy. He said, okay, I'll hire someone to do it. I said, no. It's not the point. The point, you have to do it. Hire someone. Okay. So he thought I was looking for someone for some, like I needed it for an organization I knew. I said, I'm saying it's for you, not for them. And he was arguing with me. Like, why would you give me that off-the-wall type of idea? I'm talking to you about my fears and my this and that. The more you argued, the more I realized, because I hit the nail on the head. This is it. At least I said, so why are you coming to me for advice? I'm giving you a suggestion. You don't like it. You're not even listening to me. And I'm not telling you to cut the umbilical cord and give up all the money you have. I'm giving you, and you have the time. You're not going to tell me that you're too busy. We know that. Instead of one of your flights to Las Vegas, you'll go visit that home. Anyway, to his credit, he did it. And he began doing it. A few months later, he lets me know that he's not just doing it once a week, he's doing it twice a week. And he says, it's unbelievable. These are children, don't know who I am. They don't need me. I need them more than they need me. And the love that they give, and without any airs and no pretenses, is just so beautiful. Anyway, what happened? A little light. I gave him something to hold on to that he could do on his own. Around a year later, he lets me know that he's going to open up a home for special children, because he's discovered the strengths and weaknesses of many of them. Sees a lot of things that can be improved. He says, I tried to suggest things, but I don't think I could change some of their systems. So he's going to open up a home, which he did. And he's now, I think, opening a second one. He found his calling. So he's taken money, that he has the money, that's not the issue. But he's now, you have to see, the man is completely changed as a human being. What happened was, instead of being a taker, he became a giver. And the fears dissipated. He would not recognize the same person, literally. I know now he's dating, I'm sure he'll get married, he'll have children of his own. But what changed? What changed was that he was so trapped in his routines and all this sense of, I guess, privilege and entitlement, and therefore he had no personal value. As soon as he found the cause, it changed everything. So you don't always attack fears by attacking it head on. You have to introduce something to your life that is more powerful, that you can hold on to. People ask me all the time, do I have fears? I talk about the topic, so everyone has their fears. But I fill my life, and I'm just being very honest, with so much good and commitments, which is another trick of the trade. You commit to something, then you can't get out of it. And even though you regret it afterwards, but you're stuck. I came to this Pesach program, I can't decide, okay, and I'm in a bad mood, and I'm going back home. Not that I was considering doing that, but I'm just saying. And that there's a lot of power to that. I know, it sounds like almost like a weird way, but that's what you do. You believe in something, commit to it, and suddenly you've introduced into your life something that is a constant. And you know what you're doing? You're reclaiming, yes, the innocence of your childhood when you do that. You're reclaiming something that you're sure of. Now, fear and doubts and uncertainty all are one and synonymous. You're only fear of uncertain things. You never fear when you're certain of something. Because if you're certain, so you may have some resistance, but you're certain. Now I got to figure out how to get there. So like the guy that said, I used to think I'm uncertain, now I'm not so sure. Uncertainty. I remember during COVID, that was the uncertainty was like killing people. Where are we going? Where we're headed? Now, I had no clue either where we're headed. We were all in the same situation. But I knew that I had a compass. And I knew that I had a mission, so that drove me. So it's not always about eliminating the fear. It's bringing something into your life that strengthens the other parts of you that you maybe have neglected. But again, fear has the power. People say, I wish I could do that. I assure you that some of you are going to ask me, that's a great idea, but I have so much fear I can't even commit to anything. Okay, that I don't know what I can tell you. I can only tell you is this. It's like, I don't know who said this, maybe Nachman of Breslov. Guy said it. If good things happened to me in my life, I'd be happy. And the response is, if you were happy, good things would happen to you. I recently did some research on a smile. Physical smile. Even a contorted smile, even a fake smile, that it releases all types of chemicals in your brain that make you feel better. Dopamine and the serotonin, the whole list that lately become popular. A smile. Making you smile, right? Feeling better already? Yeah. So then I remind myself of the story, this little farm boy who lived in a small little shtetl, a little farm all his life, so he never saw a modern home. One day he comes with his father. They're visiting the big city. He comes into the house, a mansion, And what's the first thing you see in a mansion? Mirrors. There are mirrors. A big mirror right in the open foyer, the opening hall. And he looks into the mirror. He never saw a mirror before. And he sees another child looking at him. And because he's so bewildered and all disturbed, that other child is grimacing at him, all kinds of making faces. So he runs to the host. He says, there's another child there making funny faces at me. So the host told him, if you smile at the child, he'll smile back. So it sounds like a simple story, but the fact of the matter is, there's a pasuk, a verse in the Cheskel that says, Kemar ponim adam l'mayla, that the way you smile, down below, God smiles back to you. That's how it is. Smile to someone, and usually see what happens. Now, trust me, I've met people that you smile to them, and you don't always get a smile back. Sometimes says, what are you smiling about anyway? You know? Well, I've had that. There was once, I remember, it was Friday, we were going on a flight. There was a woman standing behind me, and she was like making everybody crazy. She has to rush a flight to flight. Her flight was an hour after mine, but remind you. Anyway, so I let her go in front of me, and I smiled to her. She said, what are you smiling about? And then I realized, I said, good Shabbos to you. She said, good Shabbos. She was Jewish. So I smiled, and I smiled anyway. But she was upset that I was smiling at her. She wants everybody to reflect. So with that, I'll tell you this, that you control much more than you control. You know, part of fear is you feel you're out of control. It's not up to you. You say, yeah, if you knew my life, you'd also be in fear. This is what I always hear. Your life is going well, so you're not afraid. If you had a mother like I have, or a father, or other circumstances, and I'm not going to minimize. I know people that have suffered tremendously. But I've also seen suffering people who know how to smile, and they know how to be happy. So it's not like just that you have an excuse. The person doesn't realize, sometimes you can enlighten someone, sometimes they're not ready, they're not receptive. That, what are you telling me, that you're a victim? Is that what you're telling me, that you're a victim and I'm not? You're only a victim if you allow yourself to be a victim. Yes, I understand young children don't have control over their lives, and unfortunately parents can take innocent children and hurt them. But you're an adult now, and why are you behaving like a victim? Take control of your life, find something that you can believe in, find people around you, which is critical, because a person in fetters that's in a pit cannot pull themselves out of a pit. You need support. And especially people who know how to smile, and people who have some confidence. Confidence breeds confidence. I think I told the story yesterday, but I'll share it. There was a professor, Velvel Green. He was in Minnesota. He was a secular professor. I think he was a neuroscience. I don't remember exactly what it was, something. And he was a big skeptic, and it's a long story how he slowly came to Yiddishkeit and Torah and mitzvahs and so on. So he knew Rabbi Feller, the Chabad rabbi in St. Paul in Minneapolis. And so he invited him to Kinnis HaShluchim, which is one of the annual conference of all the Chabad Shluchim come together. And they asked him to speak. So he got up and said the following. He said, I'm not a shliach. I'm not someone that's dedicated my life to helping others, teaching, moving somewhere, some wilderness, and trying to make a difference. But I love being around them. That's what he said. And he told us, he gave a story, a very beautiful story, which he said there was this guy training to be a paratrooper. And, the training begins, you go up on a plane, and you watch. You observe, you help out, you help pack up this and this. And after a month, then you're expected to take your first jump. So he's all excited, he gets in line, they pack him up with a parachute. As soon as he looks down, oh no, I'm not jumping. Fear of heights. Okay, so the commander there, the sergeant says, we've seen that. Take another month. Another month, build up more confidence, more strength. Another month passes, and again, he's all this and that. One look, he gets the jitters, he's not going. Okay, so the sergeant tells him, listen, you're not made for this. Not everyone is made out for this. You don't have the nerves. So enlist in another part of the military and find something that works for you. He says, no, I really love being here. I'll help out, I'll pack lunches, I'll help put on the gear. So the guy says to him, but you're never going to jump. What's your point? He says, I know, I'll never jump, but I love being around people who jump. I'll never have the courage, but I like being around courageous people. Which is, I'm not suggesting that. My point is that it does become contagious. I mean, it's a cliche, but they say misery loves company. Fear also loves company. Because when you're around people who are also fearful, it doesn't make you look so bad. I'm not the only one. We're all, we're all part of, I don't know, is there a FA, like Fear Anonymous or something? Listen, another 12-step program. I know there's PA, there's Procrastinators Anonymous. And whenever you come to the meeting, it says it was been delayed. And they're still waiting for the first meeting. Some of us are procrastinators, that's another topic, so let's not talk about that. So the fact is, because the fact is you like to be sometimes around people that doesn't make you feel so bad. Let's all talk about our fears. But the fact is, in addition to what I've said so far, and I'll sum it up in a moment, to be around people that have courage. And that's not a difficult thing to do. You can volunteer, like I suggested to that fellow. Do things and be with people that are proactive. What it'll do is it'll trigger and evoke in you that part of you that is there. Because there's no such thing as a person that doesn't have courage. It's just gone undercover, that's all. Due to life circumstances. And again, I'm not dismissing those circumstances. I also want to make it clear, I don't think my lecture here, my talk, is just going to get rid of all your fears. Should have maybe said that at the outset. So my goal was really to just plant some seeds of some tools. Because fears that have been living with us for a long time, even legitimate ones, or even if they're not legitimate ones for that matter, remember, it's part of your routine, it's part of your habit. It's not so easy to just get rid of them. But bring into your life something of light. I can tell you, my personal experience, I've seen people really change their lives. And it's not a change like cold turkey and suddenly magic happened. I meet constantly here at this program. There's over, I think, 1,000 people here. It's hard to get to know everybody. But I go out of my way to meet as many people as I can. And it's unbelievable. It's a lot of people's life stories. I just met someone that horrible things happened in their life in the last year or two. And what are you doing here? I wasn't going to come. I'm far more in the mood to just bury myself in a basement and be alone. But it was my brother that said, come, why don't you come? I'll introduce you. I wanted to introduce him to me. And you meet beautiful people. He said the first 2 days he didn't even come out of his room. He had them bring food. And finally yesterday he came out. And and I see that, I saw a little, can't say a smile, but something. So his fear is completely trapping him. His shame feels completely demoralized. And I told him, I said, look, don't force anything, but show up. You got to show up. You never know who you're going to meet. Someone may say the right word. I have no doubt if he just allows himself, there will be changes. And it's not in any way minimizing. It's not like saying don't think about the negative things. You can't tell someone who suffers to tell them not to think about it. But you could introduce them some light. So combining everything together, if I may sum it up, I'm not sure what our time is like. How are we doing here? Oh, okay, we're fine. No, it's still 20 minutes to lunch. That's my point. We have our coordinates here that we know we need to keep us grounded in more ways than one. So, So to sum up what I said here, this presentation, number one is you are not a sufferer, you're not a product, you're not identified by the negative things that happen to you, and therefore fear is not who you are. It's an add-on. It may come from some legitimate places, very often it's imagined, and very often it's a combination, frankly. You may have something real that happened to you, but then it became much bigger than it was. And number two, that it's critical to shine the light, to understand. And three, that you get a picture, an x-ray of what you really like. And four, you have to feed that part, bringing light into your life. By doing something that you're certain of, something you know is definitely valuable, nothing that you go to sleep at night feeling, I did something good today. The last thing you want is to go to sleep at night feeling helpless, feeling miserable, feeling like, because what does it do? It just feeds your fears. It feeds further anxiety. And then being around people that have that type of attitude, working with them, volunteering for something. But all of this, as you realize, takes effort. Nothing of this is going to come automatic. You don't do anything about it. Rarely will someone just come and just save you. It doesn't work that way. God helps those that help themselves in that sense. And finally, I'll say, I grew up around people that were pretty fearless in many ways, but plenty of fear too. My father was much more fearless. My mother has plenty of fear and phobias and stuff. Many qualities that I've learned from. So I've studied this closely and looked at it. And it ultimately comes down not just to your parents and your environment, it comes down to what you commit your life to. I would tell you all, Pesach today, this holiday is a holiday of freedom. And what bigger freedom than all is freedom from your own fears. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the great sage, told his students on his deathbed, we're talking now close to 2,000 years ago, he said, Halavai, may it be that you should fear God as much as you fear people. And this he was talking to some of the greatest sages of the time. Because the fact of the matter is we see people and we don't see God. We see the people around us and we see their faces and we want to belong. Even those that like to be a little out of the box, but not too much. It shouldn't look too weird. So we all want to belong in some way. Some of us are more conformist than others. Some of us, everything is our image. Like, the worst possible thing is if people look at you in a negative way. But if you think about it, what's the counterforce to that? God. Who put you on this earth? You were chosen, your soul was put on this earth, not by those people. They are just as mortal as you are. And they're probably all looking at you, whether you accept them as well. It's like the blind leading the blind. We're all worshiping it. And the understanding of bringing God into your life in that sense, I'm not talking in a religious context now, that there's a higher force that puts you here and says, I want you here. Well, the way I like to put it is, birth is God saying, you matter. You're absolutely indispensable. We live in a world of 8 billion people. So it's easy to think, who am I? Another grain of sand on a beach. How significant can that be? Can that be? But no, we're told that you were blessed and you were created. And every morning you say, Moda'ani, thank you for returning my soul to me. You're essentially saying, thank you for giving me life. Thank you for making me significant. And thank you for giving me another day to live up to a calling that you and only you can accomplish. If you can ingrain that attitude inside you, I can assure you that fears will become weaker. I'm not saying they disappear. I'm not saying there are times will be more difficult, but you have something to hold on to. And I say this from my heart to your heart, hopefully. I firmly believe this. Every one of you has something to contribute that nobody on earth can contribute but you. Do you believe that? And not just believing it, but also acting on it. Yeah, it begins with a smile. It begins with kindness. It begins with other efforts we make in just reaching out to someone. But it's much bigger than that. It really is on a cosmic level. And one of the best ways I like to always look at it, it's like we're all indispensable musical notes in one large cosmic symphony. If you don't play your note, your music, your song, the symphony will not be complete. As simple as that. So I need you, you need me, we all need each other. And we all have our turn and our place and our role to play. And not to conclude with a negative, but Oliver Wendell Holmes has this devastating poem. It's called The Voiceless, where he writes, "Alas to those that die with their song still inside them." Here, alas to those that die with their song still inside them. So I've made it my personal mission is to help people find, discover, and then the courage to sing their song. You have unique songs. Don't sing someone else's song. You have to sing your song. I remember my son came home from school, from yeshiva one day. He was maybe 6 years old. He was all excited. He got excited. I got excited. He got excited. I said, so what? He says, I heard today a great thing. You were born an original, don't become a copy. That's what he told me. And I thought, oh, that's great, that's beautiful. Really, it remained with me till today. I remember my son is almost 40 now. He's in Pittsburgh, he's hosting his own Seder. Family and so on. Anyway, around a year or two ago, talking to my son, and I said to him, do you remember when you were 6 years old, you were all excited? He didn't remember. I remember, he didn't remember. And then I told him, you were born an original, don't become a copy. So I said, what happened to you? Are you an original or a copy? And I'm asking my son, I just wanted to, now no pun intended, he happens to be a copywriter. He's a creative director and he writes copy, he's a very good writer. So of course, in his way with words, he says to me, I'm an original copy. Whatever that means. I didn't probe further. Original copy. So you're born an original, don't become a copy. But we become because either the pressures of family, environment, school, society, social media, whatever it is in this world. And we lose ourselves in the process. So of course fear is going to be a factor. Because it's like, who am I? Am I this person? Am I that person? But when you discover that you really do have that song, or songs I should say, and you are an original, and you see and you meet other people who value you as such, not as an accessory to them. Like the guy that went on a date and speaks about himself for 2 hours, and then he says to the woman, he says, now enough about me, now what do you think about me? Like the two levels of narcissism. First he talks about himself, and then in his benevolence he says, okay, now I'll give you some equal time to talk about me. So, but to really be around people who recognize that you have something to contribute that's unique to you, and not just because it's a value to somebody else. These are the forces that really counter every type of darkness, including fears and anxieties. And again, I qualify, I'm not talking now on a clinical level, I'm not talking on a medical level. That sometimes requires more interventions, more support. So I hope I shed some light on this dark subject, this silent enemy called fear. And I hope we are all a little less fearful and a little more courageous and believe in ourselves and know you can do it. Know you can do it. People who run marathons, it's not easy. But once they've done it, they know they can do it. And that's what gives you the strength. So may Hashem, God bless each one of us, each of you, that we should truly take advantage and actualize the power of Zman Cheresenu, the freedom that Pesach gives us. And freedom is not just some general concept, it's the freedom of your own soul, of your own song, of your own inner blessings and gifts and skills. May you spread your wings, sing your songs, and may we all be enriched by it. Good moed, and everyone have a great, great day. Thank you. Okay.